I have heard Gail Rubin's name for a lot of years because I hear your name and I think Southwest Writers. So I know how long you've been a part of Southwest Writers. Um, I also find her topic really interesting. I'm going to read the blurb really quick. The only certainties in life are death and taxes, yet only 30% of adults do any end of life planning. As writers, we need to plan for the day when we're not around to receive our royalties. How will you prepare for the fate of your writing in the afterlife? Now, I'm going to take 1 minute of personal privilege. I worked in senior care for 30 years. And believe me, when people enter senior care and are suddenly being asked a lot of questions about what are your next plans, this is when you suddenly get the stuttering and the looking and the I don't know. And so since I started in senior care very young, I've always been aware there's a need to think about what happens when we are no longer with here. And so it does our loved ones a great service to share this information. So anyway, I am going to get out of the way and let Gail Rubin, who is Southwest Writers to me, take over.
So great to see you guys. I don't come to many of the meetings in person, but I am a lifetime member of Southwest Writers. It's been literally decades. And I was the person who started the email blasts. That's why I got a lifetime membership for doing that. Looking around this room, I would think most of you are under the age of 70, maybe some of you are older. And if you are younger than 70, you may have said, if I die. Yeah, newsflash, the mortality rate is holding steady at 100%. It's not if, but when. And this raises several important questions. If you're a published author, what happens to your royalties after you die? What happens to your digital assets, your websites, your social media accounts, your online life in general? And who's going to take care of all of the details when you are gone? Now, disclaimer, I am not an attorney. I don't play one on TV. So don't take my advice as legal advice, but I am a published author. I am a certified thanatologist, which is a fancy name for a death educator. Death, not death. I get that on airplanes a lot. And I have dealt with more than 10 deaths in my family and circle of friends over the past few years. And 2 of those, I am the executor of the estate. So I got some experience in that area. Yeah. And we heard that 30% of us do any end of life planning. That includes wills or trusts, advanced medical directives, funeral planning in advance of one's demise. So who's got a will or a trust in place? Yeah, you guys, maybe 50% in this room. I don't know how we're doing online. And those of you who didn't raise your hand, just saying, I don't care, I'll be dead, doesn't help anyone. A little history of me as a writer. I wrote teenage angst-ridden poetry. I was a TV producer after I got out of college at C-SPAN, and I was longing to be a writer while I was being a TV producer. I went into public relations and journalism related to PR, so I got to write articles in Presidential Airlines magazine, which was a client. Once I moved out here to New Mexico in 1990, I actually started writing for the electric co-op's newspaper, Enchantment. Got to write some very interesting articles for them. And because of Southwest Writers, one of our conferences long, long time ago, I wrote, I got to write articles for Catholic Digest. Pretty good for a nice Jewish girl. In fact, well, a couple of days ago, 9/11, I actually wrote an article for Catholic Digest about how the Sacred Heart Church in Morelos got 2 steel beams from the Twin Towers in their church for their bell tower. And those of you who are longtime members of Southwest Writers will remember my first book, A Girl's Pocket Guide to Trousered Trout, Reflections on Dating and Fly Fishing. Now that I am the doyen of death and writing about end-of-life issues, I don't promote this book quite so much. But, you know, my husband died in April of 2023, so I've been a widow for 2.5 years. And so I'm getting back out there on the stream, so I'm reading my own book again, and it's like, yeah, this is still pretty good. In addition to my books, A Good Goodbye, Funeral Planning for Those Who Don't Plan to Die, Hail and Farewell, Cremation Ceremonies, Templates and Tips, and Kicking the Bucket List, 100 Downsizing and Organizing Things to Do Before You Die, I've also created other materials. The Newly Dead game, which is like the newlywed game, but the questions are how well partners know each other's last wishes. I also have a podcast, the Doyen of Death podcast, and have created 2 TV series, A Good Goodbye, which is an interview series based on the content in the A Good Goodbye book. And my new one is Mortality Movies. I actually use movies to help get people to learn about planning for end-of-life issues. And one of the other things you might not know about me, I was one of the first people in the United States to hold a death cafe back in September of 2012. That's an opportunity for people to come together and have a little coffee or tea, some cake or cookies that we can't have here this morning, and discuss mortality issues. And since then, there have been more than 21,700 death cafes around the world in 93 countries. And we were the first in the US west of the Mississippi here in Albuquerque. Yay. And by the way, if you are interested in getting involved with a death cafe discussion, they are held regularly the first Saturday afternoon of every month at the Unitarian Church from 2 to 4. And there's a third Saturday event as well. I have a meetup group called Death Cafe Albuquerque, if you wanted to join a meetup group, where you can also find out about my mortality movie night showings. I show a movie and then we talk about what makes it a mortality movie and what we can learn from it. I'm also, just one other little brag I'd like to throw at you guys. I was a TEDx speaker in 2015, and TEDx is back in force this year, and I am a speaker 10 years later. On September 27th, we're having our local TEDx Albuquerque event, and it's going to be fabulous. And guess what I'm talking about? Death.
TEDx, what is TEDx?
TEDx, like TED Talks, technology, education, and design is what TED stands for. But it's basically ideas, big ideas. And the theme for our TEDx here is curiosity. So aren't you curious about death? So I'm happy to be doing that. But to the topic at hand, let's talk about executor experience. So those of you who have a will or a trust would name somebody an executor, the person who will carry out your wishes. For a number of years, I was the backup executor for an elderly couple named Sid and Jean. Jean died before Sid did. And the woman who was the first executor did it for many years. And Sid and Jean lived at La Vida, and COVID came and everything shut down. She was still helping Sid with paying the bills and things like that. And then one day she called me and she said, I can't do this anymore, or I won't do this anymore. Will you step up? And I said, well, I said I'd do that. So yeah, I'll do it. We had a very long conversation covering many aspects of Sid's life. And that evening, he went to the hospital and died the next day. I was immediately thrown into planning a funeral, clearing out his apartment at La Vida, getting in touch with people who were supposed to receive jewelry and artwork and other items from Sid and Jean's estate. And I had other things I was doing, but suddenly I'm the executor, so I got to go do this. Now, one positive was that Sid had a trust company that was handling paying his bills and was also in charge of dispersing the funds that were dictated in his will. And thank God we had his will and trust to guide me as to what they wanted done. They also had done a letter of instruction, basically saying, we want these people to get these pieces of artwork. We want, so-and-so to get this checks in this amount. So I had guidance. And I am also the executor for the Sheldon and Ruth Rubin Living Trust. My dad died in August of 2023, and my mom died last year, October 31st. Yeah, I said I had a lot of deaths in my family. It's been a lot. So as the executor, I have 3 brothers. My trust, my parents' trust dictated that everything be split equally 4 ways among the 4 children, and that my sister-in-law and my niece each get a check for a generous amount. And I've been able to do that because of this legal paperwork that my parents set up in advance. But if you don't have kids, or if you don't trust their ability to carry out your wishes in a will or a trust, what do you do? Well, there are trust companies that it's their job to carry out your wishes. And if you want to email me about this list, I put together a list that includes 3 trust companies, 3 care companies that can be your power of attorney for medical decisions, if you don't have a person in your life who can do that, and the contact information for the attorney I used for my estate planning here locally in Albuquerque. So if you want that, email me, Gail, Gail, at agoodgoodbye.com. So that's a nice resource that I am happy to offer to you. So having a will in place prevents your assets from going to probate court. And, a lot of people are like, I don't have much, I got a house, maybe, or I don't own my house. I have a car, I have bank accounts. There are all these elements of your life that if you don't have a will that dictates who gets what, it goes to probate court. And that gets expensive and time consuming. And a trust is a document that you put all your assets into. It keeps your personal information private. It uh, enables you to pass along those assets outside of probate court. And it just makes things a lot easier for your executor, whoever that is. So let's talk about royalties first, because we're all writers here and we got all these books, and hopefully you're getting checks every month deposited into your account. But what happens when you die? Well, in some cases, I was just informed that there are publishers who are sitting on thousands of dollars in royalty checks because they don't know who to send the money to. So how can you address this and make sure your money goes at least to someone you want to get it? For example, my husband Dave, he was an illustrator and he did a number of books for a company called Tora Ora. And he would get, a royalty check once a year for, a couple $100. Not bad. Once he died, the check came in his name. And I said, oops, I got to get in touch with these people because I can't cash this check. So they reissued the check in my name and then began issuing the following checks to me. So that will continue until I am no longer around. And I'm not sure at this point what I want to happen to Dave's continuing royalty checks. I may make an arrangement for it to go into the trust, which will continue after my death. We do have the Gail Rubin and David Bleicher Trust. So it could go into a trust and then feed over to a charity. Or I could get in touch with the publisher and let them know, once I'm dead, the executor of my estate will get in touch with you and please keep sending his royalties to a charity. And I don't know which charity I would pick at this moment, but so that's an option. Another death in my family back in March, Dave's brother, Stephen, died. Stephen was an artist and he has published 2 books on color theory, which are college textbooks. What happened is that he actually did plan ahead, and in his will, he said he wanted the royalties for his books to go to his alma mater, the Pratt Institute. So that's a good choice if you like the college you graduated from and you want to keep supporting them. So he did plan ahead, and that his friend, his longtime friend Mark, was named as his executor. So Mark is taking care of that, to do that. Thank God. And in fact, so when I published A Girl's Pocket Guide to Trouser Trout, I actually went through, it was called First Books at the time. Now it's called Author House. And every now and then, $2.33 shows up in my bank account. And I think it's from this. So somebody's still buying it. And they do have copies back there if you're interested. But I haven't let Author House know what to do with those $2.33 royalties when I check out. So I need to take my own advice, but I will figure it out and get that done now that I'm talking to you about this. Let's talk about digital assets. So I've got I've got several websites under my control. My agoodgoodbye.com website, where I talk about all of my death planning stuff. I've got a lighttreepress.com website, which is my publishing company. I set up my own publishing company. So I do get royalties from Ingram Spark and from Book Baby, which I also have published through. That's another income stream that I will need to address in terms of, okay, when I'm gone, just keep feeding the money to this other charity. And that's something that you'll need to do. But also Before I Die festivals.com, because I'm the producer of the Before I Die New Mexico Festival. And I want to promote other markets to hold these kind of events where you can come together and talk about death and learn about planning ahead and have a fun time doing it. It is possible. And by the way, we're having a one-day Before I Die festival, October 13th, Monday. It's a holiday. It's Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, and it'll be at the Unitarian Church at Carlisle and Comanche. And panel discussions, a resource fair, all kinds of great stuff. You can see my episodes of Mortality Movies, TV series. So please put that on your calendar and come on down. So when we talk about digital assets, Stephen, my brother-in-law, had his own website as an artist, and it had examples of his artwork from various series. He did a whole series about Route 66. And in fact, in his will, he said he wanted to be cremated and have his ashes scattered along Route 66. And I am going to be fulfilling at least part of that next week. I'm flying to Las Vegas. I'm going to see the Wizard of Oz in the Sphere. I can't wait. It's going to be so exciting. And then driving back, and I'm going to scatter his ashes along the Arizona part. So at least getting part of that done. You know, how do you want to be disposed of? That's another question. You know, cremation, burial, there's lots of options out there you can consider. So one of the drawbacks, though, is Stephen's website got taken down. His artwork has disappeared from the internet. And I only got one image of one of his pieces about Route 66. So what is going to happen to your website when you're dead? Do you want it to stay up there? Do you want it to be taken down? Who's going to handle that? That would be your executor. How will people access your online accounts? Do you have a spreadsheet with your accounts and your passwords and your IDs? That's what I do. It's not perfect because all these things get changed. You know, you forget your password and then you have to do a new password and then you have to update your spreadsheet. So password managers are helpful, you know, for that part of our lives. And here is a especially important point, your cell phone. How many of you have two-factor authorization on your cell phone? So if you are going to shut down the phone, you're going to shut down access to closing down accounts. So you need to keep a cell phone active until you're sure all of those online accounts that need two-factor authorization are done with, taken care of. Let's get back to wills versus trusts. So a trust, as I mentioned, you put your assets into the trust. ownership of your house, ownership of your bank accounts, ownership of your car, any properties you can put in the title of your trust. And that way, when you die, it passes to the beneficiaries you have named in the trust without having to go to probate. An example from dealing with my parents' trust is there was an account for that had $27,000 in it that was not in the trust. So that had to go to probate court. And when it went to probate, suddenly I'm getting all these letters from companies in Florida saying, we'd love to buy that house in Delray Beach, which had actually been deeded to my brother, one of my brothers. So it was not for sale, but they're like, wouldn't you love to sell this house? The only reason they knew about that house is because of that $27,000 account that had to go through probate. So you can keep your stuff private by making sure everything is in the trust and not going to probate court. You can also avoid probate without a trust by putting beneficiary names on accounts. For your house, a transfer on death deed for somebody you want to have your house. That avoids probate. Your bank accounts, you can name a beneficiary of that account. And when you die, it transfers on death to that beneficiary. You can also do that with pensions or with other accounts. In fact, God bless Stephen, he made me a beneficiary of his retirement account. So yay for me and yay for Stephen. He kept, and one thing about doing these estate plans is you need to keep updating them. I had a first husband long time ago before I moved to New Mexico. We got divorced. If you have an ex who's still on your accounts, that ex is going to get that money or whatever. So yes, do a will, do a trust, but keep updating. There are divorces, there are deaths, there are weddings. So maybe you want to put somebody new on your accounts. So keep up to date on all of those things. How are we doing on time?
You're doing fine. As much time as you want.
Oh, okay. Would you be interested in knowing about legal rights regarding the use of cartoons or film clips in your work? Okay, well, you know, on the cover of A Good Goodbye, Funeral Planning for Those Who Don't Plan to Die, I have a cartoon from Stefan Pastis, Pearls Before Swine. There's the pig and the zebra are sitting on the beach, and the pig says, I don't plan to die. And the zebra says, well, we have no choice, pig. We die whether we want to or not. And the pig thinks about that for a panel. And then he says, well, that's going to change my other plans. And when I saw that cartoon, I knew that was the subtitle of A Good Goodbye, Funeral Planning for Those Who Don't Plan to Die. And I knew I needed to get permission to use that cartoon on the cover of my book and on my website. I was able to contact United Features Syndicate was handling him at the time. I think that has since changed. That's not his syndicate anymore. But he did, I did get permission. I think it cost maybe $500 to use on the book and on the website. Think about this. If you go ahead and use somebody's cartoon without getting permission, you could be on the hook for thousands of dollars in legal fees, attorney's fees, because they will come after you. I had a cartoon from the New Yorker, a Roz Chess cartoon, headstone, that says, "I can't believe I ate all that kale for nothing." And I got a cease and desist letter from an attorney. And boy, did that scare me. I took it off my website. I took it out of my talks. In fact, I took all the cartoons off of my website. I was posting death cartoons like crazy. Cartoons are a great place for look for it. You know, not only pearls before swine, but non sequitur, zits, bizarro. There are so many cartoons that will talk about death and wills and all of these issues and poking fun at it. But, you know, it is an issue that keeps rumbling along in our subconsciousness. But there are ways that you can share cartoons on your social media. Many of these cartoon companies, yeah, they want you to share the cartoons, but you have to do it their way. You know, click on the link on gocomics.com or other related websites and share that way. So I just, in fact, shared that Roz Chess cartoon recently on my Facebook page, and it's getting lots of ha-ha-has. And films are another area where you're required to have a license to use or show a film outside of your home. You've probably seen those warning at the front of a DVD about, you know, being thrown into jail or fined $5,000 if you're showing a movie. Well, for many years, I had a license from the Motion Picture Licensing Corporation to incorporate film clips in my talks and show movies outside of the home. Part of the requirement, though, is that you're not supposed to say the name of the movie or who stars in it. So it was it's kind of tricky that way. Well, it turned out they did a survey of users of the MPLC license, and you could win an iPad. So I filled out the survey and I won the iPad, but they looked at my website and they realized I had named some movies in my talk descriptions. They revoked my license. And they gave me my money back for the year because I had been a long time license holder. But this is like, wait a minute, I'm building my business on showing movies and talking about death. So I am looking into, there are other license providers. There's something called Swank Motion Pictures, which will let you license for a particular showing, but it's not an umbrella or blanket license like I had before. And MPLC is changing their model, so they're not licensing to speakers, they're licensing to businesses for a specific location. So I'm back to showing movies at my house because you can show movies at home and invite your friends in to watch them. But yeah, it's getting kind of crowded in my living room. And one of the films that I showed earlier this year was the 1947 film, The Ghost and Mrs. Muir. You remember that one? Black and white. Oh, Rex Harrison in his sexy Rexy days and Gene Tierney. So the ghost is a sea captain who built his cottage by the sea, and he dies unexpectedly because he had the latest in technology, a gas heater in the fireplace. And sleeping in his room, he accidentally kicks the gas on with his foot. And that's how he dies, by gas poisoning. And everybody thinks he died because of suicide. Well, he's having this conversation with Mrs. Muir in the kitchen, which is her first time actually meeting the ghost in person. And he doesn't want people living in his house. And she says, well, if you, and she was like, well, what were you planning on doing? He was like, I wanted to make it a home for retired seamen. Well, she said, you should have put that in your will. He said, I didn't leave a will. She was like, why not? Because I didn't expect to kick the blasted gas on with me blasted foot. And she's like, don't shout at me. But that just goes to show we don't plan to die. So he didn't leave a will. Now, this being Hollywood, they team up and they write his life story, and she publishes it, and it becomes a bestseller and makes a lot of money. And in the end, she winds up buying the house from his cousin in Australia, who inherited it because he didn't leave a will and he didn't have any family. So we learn from the Ghost and Mrs. Muir the importance of having a will. And I would encourage you to seriously consider. Email me, gail@agoodgoodbye.com, Gail. And I will send you my list of trust companies and care companies and my estate attorney. And I would love to answer any questions if you have them. Let me leave you with the final verse of Thanatopsis. By the way, you heard me say I'm a certified thanatologist. This comes from the Greek demigod Thanatos, who was the personification of a good death. His twin brother is Hypnos, which is sleep. So sleep and a good death are closely related. And my dad used to quote me this verse from Thanatopsis. Why? I don't know. I don't know if he quoted it to my three brothers, and maybe this is why I became a death educator. But my dad learned this in college, and every now and then he'd just come out with this quote. So live, that when thy summons comes to join the innumerable caravan which moves to that mysterious realm where each shall take his chamber in the silent halls of death. Thou go not like the quarry slave at night scourged to his dungeon, but sustained and soothed by an unfaltering trust. Approach thy grave like one who wraps the drapery of his couch about him and lies down to pleasant dreams. Thank you for your attention. I got books and t-shirts in the back.